Welcome back to the Social Seller Podcast with Conor Paulsen, where we interview the world's highest quality communicators, professionals, business owners, creatives, and everything in between. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're a high quality communicator, there's a good chance you're living a lot happier life, but you're also bringing those opportunities into your life almost like a magnet. My guarantee is that on this show, we only interview people that I, one, look up to, and two, that I know are going to continue to kill the game for years to come, and I want to make sure they're on your radar. But what I've learned is by asking the best questions, we get the best responses, and that's what the highest quality communicators, our social sellers, are all about. Let's hop inside to the Social Seller Podcast.
Good morning, Joya.
Good morning, Conor. Great to see you. Welcome back from South Africa. I have a zillion questions for you.
I am so excited to be back. Yes. And I know travel is a big part of your life, and I'd love to kind of explain how that's helped you. And South Africa was unreal. Never, first time experiencing the continent of Africa and getting to spend a couple of weeks there. I realized I think there's a good chance I might need a spot there at some point soon.
I just can't believe you're on a plane for that long with a mask on. That's all I could think about when you said you were going there. Travel is one of my values. I was in a business mastermind last year, and we got a set of 50 values, and we had to winnow it down to 10. Then we winnowed it down to 5, and then down to 2. And ideally, those top 2 values really have nothing to do with your work. They have more to do with who you are when you strip away work. And surprisingly, I picked excellence, I picked education, I picked security. But my top 2 were adventure and beauty. So when you've got my back up against the wall, in order for me to stay in alignment with my work, I make sure an element of both find their way into my everyday. And when I'm planning my day the night before, and I see that none of those, and by adventure, I mean, maybe I'm planning for that next trip, right? I'm not getting out of a skydiving plane and jumping out, but I'm planning for that next trip. That in and of itself is still injecting my values into my everyday. And then as part of my women's platform, I am hosting events not only in New York City. I don't believe everything exists here. All the talent pool isn't just here. So a couple of years ago, I started hosting events in other cities because I want to meet other women in other cities. And so I'm just back from Washington, D.C. We did a beautiful brunch overlooking the White House, and it was just so nourishing and energizing in ways I can't even describe.
That is beautiful. And I'm just starting to experience these more and more and experiencing new places. And like you said, I try not to travel as much anymore, but adventure. And I think it's a mindset that goes, with it. And it allows new experiences, new memories to be kind of found. And there's something special there. What was one of the most interesting topics or takeaways for you in the group in Washington, D.C.?
Well, this is one of my signature events that are conversation driven. It's 8 women sitting around a table. I ask everyone to introduce themselves, and then I ask 3 prescriptive questions. What is a win? What is a challenge? And who do you need to be connected to? But for the opener question, this week I asked, it's December 2019, and you have the ability to delete 2020 knowing what you know. Would you delete it, or would you do it again? And so it was interesting to hear what the answers were. And everybody opted to say, that they would do 2020 again. They thought that it was a great introspective year. It really forced everyone to take stock of their lives and decide what relationships and what's important and what's not. And our lives move so fast that ability to stop and take inventory is valuable. But how can we do that more often and not when it's like foisted upon us?
Yes, exactly. And I'm curious, we've been fortunate to know each other and have a working relationship for at least a few years. And you're an incredible human. Now, where do you think that passion for travel and, could you tell us a little bit more about your story? Where did you grow up? Because I know you've always been an action taker, and you're willing to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And what did that transition look like?
I was born to parents who emigrated here from Calcutta and Burma. My parents had an arranged marriage, as is common for that generation, and I was born and raised in Pennsylvania. I think that by virtue of the fact that I was born as that generation that straddles not being very Indian and not being quite American enough has always been my challenge. I think a big part of the reason why I want to experience everything now as an adult is that I wasn't allowed to do anything as a kid. I couldn't go to birthday parties. I couldn't go for ice cream with my friends. I couldn't go to the movies. I couldn't go to prom. My parents just really over-indexed on the fear factor growing up. I don't know what they were afraid of, but everything that was unknown to them was fearful. And then double that for a girl. So I think that there are a couple of reasons why I pledged very young that I was going to leave at 18. I was going to leave my home and I was never going to come back. Number one was that I was also a product of a home of domestic violence. My dad used to beat my mother mercilessly. And it's an unfortunate byproduct of the culture. Women are second-class citizens. So I observed that. I knew something was wrong. And I was like, I know that better has to exist, but it's going to have to exist outside this home. So I'm going to leave and I'm never going to come back. The other piece that I knew is that I wanted to be a journalist. I used to sit and watch NBC Nightly News with my dad every night with Tom Brokaw. And I think for him, watching the news was patently American. And for me, it was patently my future. So I knew that that was sort of the carrot at the end of the stick with which I was going to leave and never come back. The third thing is that, this piece that I talk about really being constricted, not being able to share. And so once I got out, I really just wanted to test my boundaries. And I find that even today at the age of 48, I continue to want to test my boundaries and push the envelopes, because that's when you enter the zone of growth, right? When you're constantly seeing what else is possible. Or we just moved to Brooklyn in the last year. I've been living in Manhattan for 27 years. I know it forwards and backwards. I want to know where the post office is. I still don't know where the local, grocery store is. I get everything delivered, but I just needed a new challenge and I needed to be able to just grow in a new way. So I think that really defines me as far as my childhood goes. Like I said, I knew I wanted to be a journalist. I paid for college by myself. I paid for grad school by myself. I paid for every move around the country to come to New York and live out that dream of being a news anchor, to be a business news anchor to boot. I think the one thing that I will say that gave rise to my business today is that I, in the absence of family, really had to become a master at building my own networks, building my own support systems, and installing other strong men and other strong women in my vision and my dream. And please, will you help me get there? And at the 10-year mark of my career, I was like, well, maybe I'm not the only Indian girl that has the odds stacked against her this way. Maybe there just isn't space to have the conversations about becoming CEO or managing director or senior counsel. So what if I just created that space and did the only thing I knew how to do, which was interview the CEO that was either ringing the opening or closing bell on the trading floor, and move that dynamic in front of this audience to create teaching moments. And so Lady Drinks was truly born out of that desire to create networks and support systems for other Indian women. It's going to be 10 years next year that I've had this business. I've left television to run this full time. And it feels really great. It's such hard work being an entrepreneur, but I don't know that I would trade this life right now for anything else.
I love that. And I love that you share that. It gives me a narrative and I get excited just hearing it, right? And you hit on so many good points, right? Being comfortable with the uncomfortable,
yeah,
and having that curiosity for life and not taking, knowing that there's always going to be no's, right? That was something I learned in door knocking. One of the most effective ways, right? You're going to have no's, you're going to have roadblocks that come up. And usually when those obstacles come through, it's how do I go right at it? How do I go right through it? And versus maybe tiptoeing around. So you knew what you wanted and being able to create that. And I find that very interesting because typically we are a product of our environment, right? And I think that's probably something you and me both believe. You were aware that there was a lack in your upbringing and you were still able to kind of curate and craft your network. What would you recommend to someone maybe in their 20s or 30s that looks at you and goes, wow, you get to hang out with the coolest CEOs in the world? And I was looking through the long list of cool people that you've been able to travel with and your clients. What would you tell that 20 or 30-year-old about building that network and kind of playing the long game? Is there a strategy or advice?
I think first you have to be very clear about what you want. So for me, I knew that I wanted to break into journalism and I knew nobody in the industry. So I really needed to throw money at the problem, which is why I went to grad school. But once I got to grad school, I just made sure I networked my ass off. So one of my first jobs at grad school was to work in the alumni office, because guess what? All the alumni correspondence is coming through that office. And it was while I was working there that Mike Jensen, who was then the chief financial correspondent of NBC Nightly News, sent across this opportunity that he was accepting an intern for the summer. It was the first time that he was doing it. It was separate from the NBC internship program. I applied for it because I opened the mail and I went to New York for the very first time to get that internship. But that's what I mean by like really networking constantly, even while I was in grad school and treating it like it was a job. Yes, I was there for the education, but making sure I met at least 3 new people every single week was treating that like a job. And today I try to meet at least 3 people every day between the hours of 3 and 5. I network on LinkedIn, and then I convert those people into phone calls. So Tuesday through Thursday, I'm meeting at least 15 new people every single day. And part of that was really by partnering with you and social, the social selling enterprise that you have, because you were generating leads. I was then getting on the phone with them. And I'm happy to report that some of those people have gone on to become clients. They've gone on to become members. They've gone on to speak at some of my women's platform events. So I think that you set up a system and a process after you've decided what, you have clarity around what it is that you want to achieve. And then you just start putting those queries out there and getting in front of as many people. And if the answer is a no, then you move on. You never leave that conversation without asking, okay, I understand that you can't help me right now, but do you know somebody else that you could refer me to? And after a while, you do it enough, you build a little like Teflon cloak. And so the no's slide off a lot easier.
Yes, I agree. And I think you start to build that grit, right? That grit tank inside of us, and being able to take some no's, and you're kind of proving to yourself that you really do want this. And when you mention this, I love that you say you have to be crystal clear amongst where you're going. And I knew early on in college when I started hanging around entrepreneurs and we started our first couple of companies, I just loved being around the people. I didn't know how to create a company yet, early on. I wanted to be around this group and I didn't. So I would invest in self-development stuff because I didn't know how to create a business. I had limiting beliefs amongst, maybe I'm not as smart as my friends that are doing it. So what would you say amongst finding that clarity? Because for my personal example, I have that clarity now, but it took me taking action based on what I thought made the most sense at the time. And like you had said, I was taking unpaid internships, living in places I had never lived, staying on couches, sofas, it didn't matter. At the time, it felt right and it got me excited. Looking back, kind of like Steve Jobs always says, right? You can only align the stars looking back. I see how it all came together. But what would you say amongst kind of having, I don't want to say the blind faith, but you have to take action. You're not always going to know exactly if it's going to work out, but have that mindset of hopefully leaning towards optimism. Would you agree? Or
yeah, I mean, but you mentioned Steve Jobs. One of my favorite speeches that he ever gave was the one at Stanford to the graduating class in 2005. And he talks about the fact that he dropped out of college and he went on to audit a bunch of courses, one of which was a calligraphy course. And he was like, when am I ever going to use a calligraphy course again? Whatever. He took it. But today, that suite of fonts that you know and love in Microsoft Word are as a result of him taking that calligraphy class. So he finishes that vignette in his graduation speech to Stanford saying, just go out and experience life and the dots will connect. Just go out and just experience as much as what interests you, just to give you some more bumper guards around that. When people are like, well, I don't know what I'm passionate about. I'm like, well, think about what you used to do as a kid. Like, what is it that you could just do for hours and it would just suck you in? 9 times out of 10, your passion lies in that exercise. Maybe it's paint by numbers. Maybe it's building things. Maybe it's Legos. I don't know. But really just stopping to create some space for creativity every single week, to really sit and journal about or think about what gives you drive, what gives you passion, and committing to a consistent practice of doing that, the clarity is bound to show up because you're just showing up and putting in the work. So I think that's point number 1. And then point number 2, like I said to Steve Jobs' thing, just go out and experience life, try different things. I think a lot of things, especially being raised as an Indian child, you're taught to stay in one swim lane. But I remember taking a Russian film class my senior year because I had credits to burn. And I was like, all right, well, I know nothing about this. It really has nothing to do with my major, but I'm going to go take this class. And I just remember learning about the Odessa sequence, which today is the way that we know different sequences coming together in a film to show the progression of time. And many years later, I had a production company and I was creating a film. And I just remember taking that Russian film class, the dots connected. But at the time, I pretty much think I really only took that class because there was a guy I had a crush on that was in the class. But I was like, okay, cool, let me take this. Just like going and taking things that are completely tangential to what you do can bring in ideas that eventually crystallize around what it is that you think your purpose is or what you want to do.
Amen. I love that you say that. And I don't know how to explain this parallel, so I'm going to go for it if it's okay.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm on the mountain, I love to snowboard. And I realize whenever I'm out on the mountain that like that little kid in me just comes out, right? And it's kind of the easiest. It's different than surfing, but snowboarding for me, it's somehow like that. And now I got this feeling again, and you and me have both been fortunate to travel internationally. A lot of your work, this has been a big part of it, right? And getting to meet awesome, influential people around the world. Going to South Africa, this was my first time in a couple of years that I've traveled to a new country. You know, COVID kind of slowed those things down. And it's crazy how exciting and that kid in me kind of came out in a different way. And so I'm there and you're a little nervous, right? You're getting on you're about to be in the air for 22 hours. Yeah. Like, okay, is this right? Are you around the right group? And about halfway through, probably like 7 days in, I realized that it was almost like this internal clock reset, not only for the energy that I have for our team and our growing company at Uptown Creation, for the content that we're 20 weeks consistently uploading to YouTube, and now we're trying these things thanks to you, Joya. I'm seeing how this reset in life and having adventure is almost a necessity, right? Because our lifestyle as business owners, it's a little bit of a roller coaster, and I think I wouldn't change it for anything else, right? Like I like the highs and lows. I mean, it makes life a fun experience. What are some of the daily routine things? Because you talk about consistency. What would you say are maybe the 2 or 3 core things that you have to do every day to really set yourself up for max productivity?
I, on Sunday, sit down and I look at my week and I look at my goals. And I have a list that goes for miles, but those are all tactical. But I really Sunday sit down and think about the strategic. And I have 2 lists. I've got my list of my top 2 priorities right now, which are self-care and sales. And then I look at my list and I match up the things that are going to move the needle on those goals each day. So that's really thinking about like strategic on Sundays. And then each night before I go to bed, I really plan hour by hour my day, again, aligning it with those top 2 goals, because you could just be busy, like busy all day long, but busy does not equal productive. So what I make, really making sure I have that list of the top 3 things I need to do to move the needle forward on my business. And then 3 personal things that I need to do, because that's where the self-care comes in. And it's so easy to hit delete on that and make sure that doesn't happen. But an example of that is like, I'm just back from DC and I'm hurtling back into my routine, but I just need to make sure today that there's some space and some grace that I get to show myself, because I was just full on this entire weekend. So I think that making sure that there's space for me as the strategic thinker and the leader of this group really is preserved, and everything that's tactical, I can push off to the team that I've built, because they can do all the admin stuff. They can do the tactical, but I really set the vision, and just making sure that I'm always creating space in my calendar to do that is probably number 3. The other thing is that I have to post every day on social. I got up yesterday before I had brunch with friends in DC and made the album of what we did on Saturday. And guess what? There's all these like inbound queries now of people wanting to know, what is Lady Drinks? How can I be a member? I want to get on the phone with you. So I know the power of consistent social, especially when you have your own business, because otherwise it's like a tree in a forest. You did all this, but does anybody even know about it? Those are probably my biggest tips on consistency every single day. Always be selling, as someone once said to me.
I love it. Selling ourselves, right? And whether you're in sales or not, right? And in this podcast is called The Social Seller. And really the big part of it is the social seller is a type of sales, right? It's social selling, or I think it's very similar to what LinkedIn calls buyer first selling. Simply put, it's putting the prospect, the client first, profit second, right? And how do you be, I think you can also break it down into how do you be over the top personalized to make sure that they know it's you, and humanize yourself, but then how do you provide some degree of value before you ever ask for anything, even that first call? So I love that you mentioned that in the consistency side. When you're explaining this, it reminds me, and when we have our leadership team meetings, we're almost always trying to just work 80% of the time. We should be working on the business, about 20% in the business. And so I'm looking at this week and I'm seeing the amount of calls scheduled. And so like you had said, we have to, blocking schedule is a big part. And making sure we have the teams and systems in place to continue growing and helping.
I mean, we often do the easy stuff, right? Like, oh, it's easy for me to pick up the phone and do that phone call. But really just the harder thing is to say, I'm going to hand this off to somebody else. I need to let go. It may not be the way I do it, but it's going to be good enough. But then I'm left with all the space and time to really just do the hard stuff, which is just the strategic thinking. And how can we really protect that? And I don't know that I really realized that until the last couple of years, that how important that really was. Because I was just somebody like, oh, well, I can do it, so I'll just do it. I'll just be busy. But now I just have a steadfast rule for myself from 6 o'clock on Friday till 12 o'clock on Sunday, no work, no responding to work emails, nothing, because I just need to create that space and be very intentional about it.
I love that you say that. And that's definitely a life hack I'm realizing. And I know you get to interview a lot of incredible people, influential people on your podcast too. And I'm starting to realize it's almost like everyone I interview on the social seller tends to live a very similar lifestyle, right? There's a lot of structure. There's discipline, whether they consider themselves disciplined or not, because we all like to look at our friend and we all know that friend that's even more disciplined than we are. So I love that you share that. And, for anyone that wants to get in contact with you, wants to learn more about Lady Drinks, I know you do awesome one-on-one coaching for public speaking. You have a masterclass that starts up again in September, and then Lady Drinks. Could you just kind of explain how you're helping and who you're looking to work with, or who can get value from it?
I mean, especially in the pandemic, because only this modality is what we had available to us. And this is how we were selling. This is how we were getting buy-in. This is how we were leading teams. So a lot of people started asking me for public speaking coaching. And so now I'm accepting 5 more private clients one-on-one. What does that mean? I tailor the 6 weeks really bespoke to your calendar and your specific goals. So that's offering number 1. Offering number 2 is that I've got a masterclass for 7 corporate women. And I'm really teaching you how to walk away with 6 stories about how you brand yourself. And that's kicking up on September 8th. And then finally, I have this women's platform, and I really drive it by one of 3 ways: peer mentoring, expert mentoring, and leveraging the network. And so I'm always looking for members for that. And that's an ongoing thing, but just really high quality, high performing women in senior leadership is what I'm seeking for that.
I love it. And I love that you utilize LinkedIn and provide so much value for the community. The content you put out, it's always value-based, it's educational, it's entertaining. So thank you for everything you do. And thanks for hopping on, Joya. This is awesome.
Always. I can't wait to meet up in person on one of these wonderful events that Celia puts together.
I know, right? Coming soon. Thanks again.
Take care.